We're gonna go ahead and get started and let people trickle in just so I can get all of the information. So we have Dr. Susan Koerner here today. She's an amazing professor from KU. She's gonna be talking to us about AAC. And I just wanted to hit a couple things before we get started that Monica had shared with me about AAC. The main thing being that as we're kind of moving forward with our AAC process and introducing AAC, she wants to make sure that an SLP is always involved in that process, just so we can kind of help to facilitate that trial, getting a device, all of that. And then the other thing would just be that the AAC needs to be included in the IFSP in some capacity, whether that's like on the review tab or sources, stuff like that. So just making sure that we're including that somewhere. I'm sure she'll send out an update with more information on that, but just wanted to give you guys a heads up. And then we also have Elizabeth from Leavenworth County here too. So make sure to say hi to her too. She's an SLP came to learn about AAC. So that is great. So I'll have you go ahead and get started, Susan.
Awesome. I'm so excited to be here. I will quickly just do a couple announcements of upcoming potential continuing education that you might be interested in if you do want to learn more about AAC. The first one is this one that's sponsored by CASHA, and it'll be here in Kansas City. Last year, Julie and I did the same presentation out in Hayes, and it was very well received. It's 2 days, and they'll bring devices in, so it's lots of hands-on opportunities. So that'll be in June. And then every summer, Pop Drop does a free online AAC conference called AAC in the Cloud, and it's 2 days also in June. You can log in online. You can also watch them after the fact. You can watch them in real time. And all of their previous conferences are archived. So if you were like wanting to see if there's something out there that answers a question you might have, that's a great resource. They typically have SLPs, occupational therapists maybe, but also individuals who use AAC present at that. So we have a lot to get through, but I think the first thing I want to do, just to make sure I don't run out of time, is talk a little bit about the AAC lab that we have at KU Med. So my background before I returned to academia, I worked clinically full-time for 5 years in a variety of different settings, mostly in outpatient settings. So either outpatient rehab across the lifespan or then outpatient. And then I returned to academia because I had this like desire to empower future SLPs to be more confident in AAC, but also in practice SLPs. I started my PhD in 2019, right before COVID. It was a perfect time. And I was working as a TA on the Lawrence Clinic and the AAC lab there until 2022, when I was hired on as clinical faculty at the Med Center campus. And then I sent a cold email to Children's Miracle Network. Our clinic right now, our in-house clinic is a pro bono clinic. So we serve a lot of children who are underinsured or uninsured. So I kind of was like being proactive and thinking about, okay, if this kid comes in for an AAC now, doesn't have insurance, funding opportunities. So I sent a cold email to the director of Children's Miracle Network, and we got a meeting, and she was like, I love this. And give me a wish list of everything you would need to make your job easier to do AAC events. I was like, okay. So that's how this started. We're going to talk about AAC a little bit in another presentation, and you might benefit, and this too. So we've just since its inception in August of 2023, Children's Miracle Network has donated probably like $60,000 worth of equipment. So we have it on site for our students to learn about AAC, and so that it's easy for us to do these evaluations. So our numbers, because my time is divided to teaching, clinical, and all kinds of other things, is I do 6 pediatric and 6 adult AAC a semester, supporting students through that. So about 4 NASLP students are learning this process every semester. And for every evaluation, they get 3 clinic contact hours, which as students, you remember, was very important. And then for each AAC evaluation, we have to try, for insurance standards, at least 3 different systems. So that's kind of the numbers. So we have 7 dedicated AAC systems on site, 4 with IAs. So for children with more complex communication needs, we have a lot of options that they can try, and you don't have to get loaners and all of that. We also have 2 iPads in the lab with all the apps. We have Switch toys, we have textbooks, we have children's books that feature AAC communicators. And it's a teaching and learning space for students in the SLP department. But more and more, we're getting other departments involved. This semester, we had an OT capstone student do her capstone in the lab. She did a really amazing project, which I'm very excited about. And hope to continue to just expose OT students to AAC in the lab, through the lab. So these are some goals I set for the lab when it first started, was to create opportunities for people across campus to learn about AAC. That's in progress, and my OT student kind of piloted that this semester. Was able to already start an AAC group focused on literacy and parent training, and that's for kids under 4. We call it Early Communicators Group. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of a mini version of the camp that we do in the summer, but it goes across the semester. It also helps us get some of those kids off the wait list. Our current pediatric wait list for evals is 3 years. So that's why I'm like, I need help. And then also inviting occupational therapy students. Not only did I have this capstone student, but we've been inviting OT students to come participate in the evaluations themselves, which has been really helpful for us and impactful, I think. So we've done over 40 AAC evaluations across the lifespan since August 2023, which is very exciting. We've had 3 devices of partially or fully funded by Children's Miracle Network, and 1 funded by Assistive Technology for Kansans. That was an adult. We've had over 130 visitors to the lab, just like touring it. And 7 lab tours, and then over 30 students have completed some sort of experience in the lab. So I already talked about CMN, what they're doing. It's amazing. Love them. So like I said, sad reality is we have a really, really, really long pediatric wait list. We just did our last pediatric AAC eval until October. Friday, because we do camps in the summer, we don't really do the evaluations, and then I'll go on maternity leave. So it breaks my heart, but that's the reality because I'm the only faculty member right now that's doing them. Due to our mission, and right now we're a pro bono clinic that's funded by endowments, we try to prioritize families that wouldn't be able to get the services otherwise. We often, because we also have a wait list, refer out to other potential locations like Kansas City Developmental Therapies, Ability KC, Olathe Med is also doing AAC events. Very exciting. Very exciting. Playabilities and Children's Mercy, I think, are in progress. I've been in conversations with people at both of those places trying to figure out logistics. And actually over the weekend, CTS, I found out the student does them, but they don't do standalone. So if they use a model where you do an evaluation and they do the trials over 30 sessions, which is a model I love. And I did when I worked full-time clinically. It's better for a lot of reasons in an outpatient clinic, but it just is a little different process to explain to families. So those are kind of a list of places to refer.
PLC is taking kids down too.
PLC, that's great to know. So I would love to build capacity in the Kansas City area because there's obviously a need for this. And the kind of triage cases. So especially since we have the lab for kiddos who are very complex, might need alternative access for them to be able to come to me where I have all those devices on site to coordinate loaners and all of that. Might be helpful. Most companies do allow SLPs to get access to the apps for free. So if you have an iPad and an ASHA number, you can kind of figure out how to get free access to most of the AAC apps, which is really great. And you can get loaners from companies. That's what I did when I worked clinically full time. And that's why that model of doing your trials over a period of sessions instead of 1 2-hour block works really well because you don't have to worry about getting all the loaners on site on the same day for the client. You can kind of do it as they come in. So then eventually I'd love it if all these places that are doing AAC evals in Kansas City could triage and help each other figure out what each clinician's strengths are and which ones can be. So I think that was all I had on this one. Oh, if you want to make a referral to our clinic, I have some business cards, you can grab them. But you really just contact Laura Mello in our department. You can email her at this email here or call her. Just some important information. Some insurance policies require a face-to-face visit note that where the physician documents the need for AAC. So, and within the last 6 months. So if you're planning a family to like go through this process, and you can get like, okay, we got you on the schedule, you need to get scheduled with your PCP and you need to talk about this and make sure they document it in the note. Unfortunately, that's just another requirement that insurance can be cleaned up because we already have to have physicians sign a prescription. So it's kind of, they want it 2 ways, the physician agreed. And then if like, I love being able to partner with the SLPs, like working with the child because of my reduced clinic schedule. I often don't have time for a multitude of follow-up appointments. I do one happy talk per day consultation appointment, get the device set up, and then have to like send it out into the world most of the time. So any impressions you have, getting that release of information on your end, sending your impressions can help facilitate that process with us. Yeah.
So is, like, I went with a family to the Lawrence campus and did theirs. Is it a separate wait list?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so
Great question.
is it the same paperwork? Because it was like a pretty hefty application. that we did.
So it's probably similar, but we do have separate. It's like it's a whole completely different clinic.
So would you ever say get on
Yes,
2 wait lists?
I would say get on all of the waits.
Okay.
But then I would also, it'd be super helpful, if the family got in somewhere to have them like call back and say,
Right.
I'm in somewhere. Because like honestly, we know that families do that. And so every once in a while, our GTA or our admin is having to call back through and they're like, oh no, we already got this. Oh, we already did this. And so we don't really know how long the wait list is actually. So yeah, anywhere that they can get in. And I think just explaining, like I said, there's different processes. We do a 1-2 hour, we do a pre-assessment interview and then a 2-hour evaluation block. For most kids, that works. The one on Friday was very complex, primarily Spanish speaking, 3-year-old, leptomeningeal, and I was like, at the end, I was like, I need to see her more before we can make a decision. Or if I know a kid is coming in, CVI, cerebral palsy, and I know it's going to be a process, I'll get them scheduled in one of my therapy spots. So I had a kid, older child this year that we did his eval over the course of the entire school year on Thursdays. So those kind of like, that's where your impressions are helpful too, where you're like, oh, I think this kid would be great. You can get it done in 2 hours probably, or there's a lot going on. And I think more opportunities to work with them might be helpful. It is a good cue for us. Make sense?
So if a child is on your wait list, is it helpful for us to kind of like reach out from the start and give
Yeah.
our impressions? Okay.
Yeah, because when Laura is scheduling, she'll kind of sit down with me sometimes and be like, oh, like this is this person, and sometimes we have no information. Sometimes they fill out that giant packet of paperwork, but sometimes they don't. And so sometimes like we don't know, I don't know anything really, especially if they're not in KU meds on EHR until that pre-assessment interview. And then it's, oh, maybe we should have scheduled this differently. Yeah.
Is the Olathe, is that fairly new, or is that because KU and Olathe combined?
That was before. So I actually went to an AAC training a year ago in December at Ability KC, and it was all about access. And I met the Olathe Med SLPs there. And they said that they were doing them. I was like, oh, I'm so excited. But yeah, so I think they do a lot with ALS, but they did tell me they do pediatric and adult. So, yeah, anyway. Great questions. Please interrupt me as much as you need to. This is a picture of the lab. It's an old picture, so there's like 4 or 5 devices there right now too. That was right at the beginning, but very exciting. If you're ever on campus and want to come check it out, you should be email. I have to like slow down my speech. I'm trying to get through everything, but baby is making it very, I don't have as much lung capacity. So if you hear me heavy breathing. Okay. As I said, I'm a clinical assistant professor at KU Med. My dissertation, I don't have a lot of research time or scholarship time, but my dissertation was on was supporting in practice SLPs and AAC. So like, this is what I'm to do. I'm so excited to be here today. I do receive a salary from KU Med as my financial disclosure. Non-financial, I'm the director of the KU Children's Medical Network AAC lab. I have professional social media accounts. I used to have Facebook, but then someone hacked me and I got in Facebook jail. So you can only find me on Instagram now, like legit Facebook jail. I couldn't even like make a new email to make a new profile. They were like, no, you're too, it's a mess. So you can find me on Instagram. I am the CASHA Vice President of Communications right currently, and I'm an ASHA member. So my first question to my students at the start of the semester for AAC Adult Clinic is, on a scale of 1 to terrified, how are you feeling? So starting that out here too, excited? Anyone feeling excited? Yeah, jazzed, nervous. Anyone? It's totally fine. All my students look at me and they're like, we're terrified. It's fine. It's fine. Apprehensive. All of those things. So I always share with people that I have this passion for AAC, and I've developed a skill over many, many years of doing these evaluations. And I tell my students, I'm like, I don't necessarily care if you leave my clinic rotation and you're like, I never want to do one of these really complex AAC evals that has to do the documentation and all the funding paperwork. If you're like, not for me, that's okay. My only goal is that you leave this clinical rotation and you're no longer thinking that's too intimidating. I can't do the technology. I can't do AAC. So that's my same goal for you. But it just becomes less intimidating if it has been. So my goals are to share my knowledge and experiences, have some hands-on learning opportunities, to provide you some feedback along the way, and to foster a supportive learning environment. I would love it if you would share your knowledge and experiences. We're all professionals. You all have a wealth of knowledge about things that I don't know about. I only worked very briefly in infant toddler services, right? I do teach the class now, so hopefully you're getting hired. But so we all have knowledge to share with each other. Ask the questions. So I'm glad that you are already doing that. Participate in discussions, and then let me know if something doesn't make sense. AAC has a lot of jargon. And if you don't understand something I said, or it sounds like I was talking in a different language suddenly, I need you to tell me. Otherwise, you're just gonna get lost. Because there's a lot to go over. So I always want to start talking about my personal clinical philosophy, because I feel like that lays the foundation for us for you to know how I look at AAC and compare it to how you look at AAC. And so we can have a shared understanding. So these are kind of the 4 foundation stones of my clinical philosophy, especially as it relates to AAC. This is a communication bill of rights. How many of you have seen this before? Just a couple. So this was developed, actually Dr. Nancy Brady is one of the authors of this, but it's written by the National Joint Commission for Individuals with Disabilities. And I don't know if you can read it very well in the back. But this just basically lists the rights that every person has as it relates to communication. So can you read it? if you, I mean, if you're reading them and you like want to shout out something that's really impactful, to you,
Reject offer choices.
reject offer choices, yeah.
I like the receiving a response to any communication.
Yeah, we're receiving your response even if the responder can't fulfill that request. I like this one, be spoken to directly. Sometimes I still catch myself doing that, talking to a parent about a session and I'm like, I'm so sorry that we're talking about you in front of you. It's not intentional.
Also have a device that's functional
Mm-hmm.
at all times.
Yeah, and charged if needed. So this is something that I have up in the lab that I bring up almost in every presentation that I do about AAC because I feel like it helps to demonstrate the broadness of what AAC should be. And because oftentimes it's like so narrowly put into like requesting, and that's the only right that we're focusing on. Whereas like we can be building the foundation for all of these things very early. I did not make this graphic. If you Google communication bill of rights, and you want to like hang this up or bring it with you to show parents, it's easily Googleable. I don't know if that's the word. I just made it the word. The other thing is the criteria, the least dangerous assumption. So I'm just going to read this verbatim because I think it's just so good. The criteria of the least dangerous assumption holds that in the absence of conclusive data, educational decisions ought to be based on assumptions, which, if correct, will have the least dangerous effect on the likelihood that this students will be able to function independently as adults. So for me, the least dangerous assumption as it relates to AAC is if we got this child access to AAC, would that negatively impact their long-term future? And most of the time the answer is no, because it's just a modality of communication to add to the communication that they're already have it successful. There's a really great clip or video that Dana Meter made. She's a mom of a child who uses AAC, and she became an SLP after her really complicated journey to get her daughter AAC. And she talks about how she went into like from preschool to kindergarten, and they had this interview with the school guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor was like, hold up, like called everyone into her room because Maya was using the AAC so proficiently that they had to completely scrap the drafted plan that they had for Maya as far as placement because they had placed her too low. So that is a prime example of that. And then to presume competence, which kind of goes along with the least dangerous assumption. So this impacts every way you interact with your client. So the direct instruction you provide, speaking to them instead of about them in front of them, and then creating an equitable communication environment for them. The last thing is multimodal communication. So my thing that I just, probably my soapbox, and I need to get like a poster to put somewhere because my students are probably sick of me saying this, but the best communication is successful communication, no matter what it looks like. So when a parent comes in and they're like, this sounds okay, but I'm really concerned because I really want them to speak. And me too. I really want that too. It's not successful right now a lot of the time. But what my biggest thing is that I want your child to successfully communicate as much as possible in whatever way that works, right? I'm not going to say, if they say something, wave at me to say hi, I'm not going to then say, well, say it on your talker and like condition your child to use AAC. Whenever they're successful, that's what I'm going to respond to. I might model it back on the AAC so that they can see another way that they could say it, right? The same way that if a kid points at an elephant and you follow their gaze to the elephant, you say elephant, and then you do the fun elephant noise. You don't then say like, say elephant, right? It's the same with AAC. So no matter what it looks like, if it's successful, then we go with it. the caveat is sometimes I have to tell my little friends and the AAC evals, like, I know that you know that I know what you're communicating, but I need to get this data right now. I'm gonna make you say it today, I promise in the future. But you know, all have met those sassy kids that I have this in early communicators group with this little girl. She wants to leave, so she'll point at the door, just like stand there. And I'll say, I know you wanna go, and then she'll just. That was, I wanna go with an exclamation point, so. And I'll model go on the talker and anyway, so. Okay, so really what I think I love about AAC is that I feel like it's just a giant puzzle to put together and I'm just the problem solver. And for me, there's rarely ever a no. Sometimes there's a not yet because the child's not doing enough symbolically when they come in for my 2-hour eval walk. And I'm like, I tell the parents this like breaks my heart every time. If I would send a device home with you, give you training and say, this is what you need to do to build this skill. And they'll come back in a few months and then we'll be able to make a better decision. But I don't have iPads or like devices that just like Oprah out. But AAC is just like figuring out what works and how the little minds work, and what their responses to different kinds of AAC is just so fun. And then like you guys obviously love infants and toddlers. There's nothing cuter than like a little toddler carrying a device to a parent with a little diaper butt. It's me every time. Okay, we're gonna quickly go through some AAC jargon. And like I said before, I'm gonna go through some, but if in the future I'm saying something that doesn't make sense, then interrupt me. So in the AAC world, there's a few different kinds of AAC. We have low or no tech, which would be like gestures or communication boards, just paper. We have mid tech, which is like the Go Talks or button. So those are not, they're like static. The displays don't change. It's always those 8 pictures or those 6 pictures, right? And we have high tech, which is probably what you're most familiar with. What's on your iPad, on your tables. Those are those displays will change once you press a button. And the button will change potentially to another word because you're navigating through layers of software. And obviously we have the really, really high tech right now, which is eye gaze, which will soon be artificial intelligence or brain computer interface. I don't know. That's just beyond me. So it's important for me to just emphasize that these different levels are not a hierarchy. You can start wherever. So you don't have to like master a no tech system, then mid tech, then high tech. When I was in my master's degree, that was definitely very much the model. And you think about it, if I put an AAC system in front of any of you, it's that communicate, you look at me like I was crazy and be like, I don't know what the system is, right? It was new to you. So any AAC will take instruction and teaching. And so that's why like switching between different systems just kind of prolongs the process, right? Mastering one system doesn't correlate to having the ability to use a completely different kind of system. That makes sense. So hardware on the device, it's like the iPad, or I didn't bring any devices with me today, but like there's hardware called the Accent 1000 you might have heard of, or the Pro Slate or the TV Pilot. That is like the computer. So if someone says AAC hardware, that's the computer part of it. And then we also have, or here's, this wonderful slide that Julie Gax put together, different hardwares from different companies. And I'll send these slides to Hannah and she can share it after. So if you go to their websites, you'll see all these different kinds of hardware with each company. So these are the companies. I mostly work with like Talk to Me, Forbes, PRC Satillo. These are combined now. this is a little dated because it's one company. And then honestly, this probably needs to be updated because Tobii Dynavox just came out with new, like updated their hardware last year. I think these ones wouldn't be as pertinent for you all because they're more adult based. And then the software, the easiest way to kind of differentiate that is like the apps in the system. So like you have TV Snap, Grid 3, Proloco to Go, Force for Life, Touch Chat, all of those. And here's another graph of all of the software per company. There's a lot. That's a lot of, like, it seems simple, like hardware, software, then you see the list and it's like, ooh, I could be reading a report and be like, I don't know what that is. Like if I got something and it was like iTech Digital Systems on Bright, I'd be like, I don't know what that is. I'd have to look it up. But even me being in this world, there's some software and hardware I'm not familiar with.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So the companies are aligned with like the device and the software, so can you interchange them?
Well,
You can
okay,
use different software, like could you use a software that's from like Nova Chat on a TD?
no, but sometimes. So there are like a couple companies that do third party. So like Forbes AAC, they make the Pro Slate, which is a really great option for a fundable iPad, but it's an iOS platform. Okay. So with Forbes, you can get any app that's available, most of any app that's available on an iPad, you can get on a Forbes Pro Slate. However, the one exception is TD Snap now, because TD Snap is a subscription. Yes. And the benefit of doing like Forbes has a really great hardware with a really cool mount or a really cool kickstand, and then really nice key guards if you have a client that might need a key guard. Otherwise, no. So if it's like, I guess these ones are also, this is also an iOS platform that has different apps. This one, I'm not sure about those. That's an iPad with apps. They only have their company's software on them. And these are only those softwares and the same Tobii Dynavox. So it depends on the company and the combination. You might have also heard of AbleNet, and it's very similar iOS platform. So you just have to like talk to them and see what is available. It's funny because every company now has iOS platforms. It's an iPad case, but you can get it funded through insurance. And the TD Pilot down here, that is an iPad with iGames, which is super cool. And I'm seeing a client and I was emailing back and forth with the school. SLP was also doing trials using devices from Missouri Assistive Technology. She's like, yeah, we're using the Pilot with Touch Chat. And I was like, what? Because you can get those devices unlocked. So she got the app on the iPad, but I was like, that's not fundable. You know, because so you have to be careful. Just because you could get it on an iPad that you have doesn't mean it's fundable. Does that make sense? It gets kind of complicated. Okay. Also, it's just really important to know, and I don't know why they do this, but every company has different words for the same thing. Super frustrating. So, in different devices, you might see page sets or vocabulary or users, and it's essentially the same thing. So, but once you get used to like exploring different devices, you'll understand, but just know that the lingo is different for each company. And then there's dedicated versus non-dedicated. So dedicated means fundable through insurance, and this means it'll only have the communication app. With a caveat that you can pay like $10, $15, depending on the company, after the fact to get it unlocked. So like for an adult with ALS, they get an eye-based device, they're still trying to work. It's really important for them to have access to email, social media, all of that stuff. You and I know the importance of that. Insurance doesn't. They could care less. But so the family can pay $50. It can be unlocked. It's a full computer. They can browse the internet, they can go shopping, they can do all the things on their device. Some kids that's helpful for. Most kids that your age group that you're working with probably not, because they're perusing will just be like Miss Rachel. They haven't yet learned that, oh, I have to put Miss Rachel away in order to tell my mom something. So that's a kind of case by case thing. And then not dedicated would be like open hardware. Family has an iPad. They're like, what app can I buy? May is coming up, Autism Acceptance Month. Apps go on sale. So if you have a family with means and you kind of have something you've been trying, like have an iPad, great time to buy. But that iPads and apps are not available for insurance. But it could allow access to multiple different softwares. Or if you get an iOS platform that is unlocked. Yeah, so there's just a few companies that you might, and like their logos. I'm a very visual person, so the logos along with the name is helpful. And this is another great tool for thinking about AAC and the data needed for evaluations, or to think about for goal writing. So you all, I know, all the SLPs, I mean, some of you are OTs, right? CTs? Yeah, so the SLPs, you're going to be the masters at linguistic competence. Okay. You know how to do language therapy. I know you know. So that's the easy part of AAC. But there's all these other things. Operational competence, that might be something that PTs and OTs help with, figuring out the best way for kids to be able to access the device, turn it on and off, adjust the volume, all of that. And then strategic competence, knowing if there's a communicate, like, right, where the best communication is successful communication. So we would need to teach how to resolve a communication breakdown. They don't understand it when I point or when I speak. How do I say it on AAC? And you have social competence and psychosocial competence. So confidence, attitude towards AAC, building that support in the people around them. Yeah. So this is the communicative competence. I think it was written by Light and McNaughton. There's lots of different visuals on the internet, but there's also a great paper that should be available. If it's not available to you and you hit a paywall, you can email me and I will get it to you. So there's a little bit of a hidden curriculum when it relates to AAC. One of the biggest ones is like the tech support, like the people to know. For example, students will come to me like, it's broken. I'm like, okay, have you called tech support? They're like, no. And I'll say, okay, I'll do it with you once. And then, but the next time, I'm going to show you what information you need, how this looks. The next time you will do it. And I can sit next to you. But like, just that practice of calling tech support, I do it all the time. I did it panicked before the last 2 evals I had because things were going wrong. So that's something in itself. I think I have those tech support numbers like programmed into my phone. But also knowing your regional consultants, they are so helpful. I have all of their numbers in my phone too, and I will just text them. I've known Andrew and Betsy for like 10 years now. Natasha's kind of, and Morgan are kind of newer to the area. But I think all of them will be at that CASHA conference in June. So that's one of the things that we did at last year is not only we have hands-on opportunities, but we invited the reps. So if you can meet them and like get to know them, understand the support that they can provide. So like all of them will go out to the home after device comes in, right? They're another resource for continuing support for the family. All of them except Andrew are speech therapists. Andrew's really great with the tech side. So when I have an adult getting a device and they're asking me questions about email and text messaging. I was like, but Andrew does, and I will send them to your house. So they're really great to know too. If you go to any of the company websites and like type in your zip code, they'll direct you to who to email. Okay. I think we already talked about this one. Okay, so myth, only private practice or med SLPs can complete AAC funding through insurance. Not true. That's a common myth though. So anyone with credentials can submit a funding packet through insurance. Like I said, not that everyone wants to, but it is possible.
I have a question. Does that include Medicaid, Kansas Medicaid? Because their requirements, in the DME manual are a little strict. Like you have to have so many years of AAC experience. Yeah, yeah, it has to be I think it's a certified clinic.
That's in Missouri.
No, it's Kansas.
Really?
Yeah,
Is that new?
no, it's been there a couple of years.
I've done it since my second year practice.
And I don't know how much they like follow up with that, but if you reference the DMA manual, like some of the insurances will lean into what it says. And then other times I don't see that. And I'm talking, I mean, I've seen them lean into it for like CRT equipment.
I am not a certified provider of Kansas Medicaid, and I am not devices.
Okay.
I don't even know what the certification process would be. I've never heard that.
I think it's just a bunch of BS that
No,
they
it
put
is.
on there. The people who write them don't really know what they're doing.
The whole funding process through Kansas Medicaid. I have been called into a meeting, because I got too sassy with an auditor, with the director of Kansas Medicaid. And I was very cordial in the meeting, but I mean, my point came across, because basically in the end, they said, we just don't want funds to go to a device that's gonna sit there on the shelf. And I said, well, then we need to pay for follow-up therapy. Kansas Medicaid funding is tricky, and I always warn families that I'm anticipating having to write an appeal from the very get-go. Like, this process is not going to be smooth, but then the last, like, 20-year-old, she was 20, she had Kansas Medicaid, gave this family this whole prep of like, this is gonna be a long process, but I'm here for you. I've met the director of Kansas Medicaid, like, they know me. And I am a dog with a bone, I will not give this up. And then she got her device by the end of the month. Like, so you just can't predict, but it is like, the insurance process is difficult. And a lot of Blue Cross Blue Shield policies have actually written out AAC as a funding, like as something that they fund, just point blank. And at that point, I can't do any appeal. Like, it's written in the policy that they don't fund it. So
Do you think it's just their lack of knowledge about what AAC is, and when they hear that, they think, oh yeah, I'm not buying an iPad for a kid?
I think that's part of it. I mean, like my dad's family had a small business. And one of the reasons they had ended up having to sell was just the price of insurance. And so I wonder if there's like the people who are making the insurance plans think like, oh, this is something that it's just a line item that we can cut that will save this business this much money. You know, I don't even know sometimes if there's that much thought that's put into it. But I'm sorry.
There's better ways to say it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I sometimes I try to play like, think about it from everyone's point of view. But I would never like accept that. And I've also told families like, what you need to do, go to your company and say, my kid needs this, and you've written it down in the policy. So what can we do to change that? But that's not something I can do. But it is very complicated. But that's why I'm really grateful for Children's Miracle Network. If you run into something like that, that's when one of the caveats for Children's Miracle Network is that we try insurance funding and they have some connection to KU. So even if that's just like getting them in with me to confirm what you found, then you can be like, let's get them advice. Everything's good. So yeah, the insurance process is a lot. I don't think we need to go through that. So how are we doing at time? Oh, good. We're like only halfway through, right? Any questions so far? Anyone tried to fund through insurance? I don't really, so that'd be a whole other presentation of like the report to write and what that process is. Even like my students, they do the eval, they write the report, and I do all the other paperwork, because they're just not with me long enough to see it to the end. But it is sometimes fighting the good fight. And knowing how to write things. Like sometimes I'll tell families, I have to make you or your child look bad in this report because insurance wants to know that you need it. So I have to present you at your worst. It's not strength-based writing, which is the opposite of what we typically teach our students. Okay, so we're going to talk through some teaching strategies. And you have iPads on some tables at Proloquo to go. So this is something you want to practice while we're going through. You're more than welcome to like get together. Some of you, this might be information you already know. But it is good to practice. Is anyone not familiar with Proloquo that they want like a quick tutorial? Yeah. So Proloquo, it will look different on everyone's little system. Oh, actually, it will look different.
I have a full confession.
So you can see Proloquo is going to be added site on.
Okay.
So you're just looking for, you have to go buttons, which is right. So this is something to know though, because if you have a kid that has Proloquo and you're used to it looking a certain way, you might get somewhere and be like, this is not what I'm used to. Right? There's a lot of ways you can customize it. So Proloquo, everything's color coded. You have your pronouns on the right. They're orange. You have some blue. Just wait, this is not the whole page. There we go. Pronouns in orange. You have some verbs in pink, some little words in green, some like qualifiers over here in blue. Question words are white. And then any of the folders on the bottom that are white and look like a folder, those will open up into a new page. So if I go to things, you can see there's more folders like furniture, animals, all of that. Another thing about Proloquo, took me way too long to figure this out. I was first getting to know Proloquo, which is something to consider because it's OTs. This is like something for you to know. If a kid has difficulty with fine motor and the action of pressing and holding, it's how you get verb conjugations or other forms of words. So that would be an access thing to be aware of when you're picking out a potential app. Is that if a kid can't press and hold, they won't be able to say me, which is important for a kid, especially toddler kid. Right? I want to go. And then like in order to get stop being or stopped, you have to press and hold. Any of the buttons with the triangle on the top will be ones that you can press and hold to get different. That was a very brief introduction to Proloquo. If you're modeling with a kid, which is something that no matter what discipline you're in, is a great way to incorporate their AAC into a session. It's basically just pressing a word on the device while you're speaking it out loud. This is a way to reduce the input-output balance. So kids who are speaking get like thousands of hours of people speaking in front of them before we ever think about them getting the first words out, right? But kids use AAC, if they're not having someone show them where the words are, how to use it, they're not getting the same level of input and demonstration. It also teaches where vocabulary is in the system, how to navigate or move through different buttons to find a word, and demonstrates use of AAC in real world contexts. So, a home routine that you might use. Bathing. Yeah.
With an electrical device.
You can put an AAC device in a big Ziploc baggie and it'll still work. Done it. I run around with a unicorn water sprinkler thing after because I went to go pick him up for speech and they were doing water play outside. And I was like, well, I guess I'm getting wet. So you can put it in Ziploc baggies, great, but they also make shower curtains with pockets. So you could like hang it in there. I've never tried that, but I have seen them on Amazon. And then they're for people who want to like watch movies in the shower, I guess, but I'm like AAC. Why else would I make that for AAC? Okay, so baby, so come up with some words, and I always say, start on that home page, press the home button. And just on that home page, if your parent is already overwhelming, what words on that home page already have model and back time?
Yeah.
I was gonna try to pull it.
In and out.
Yeah, you can
Um,
change.
Like yours is about inside things, like I found the most business, like that's really overwhelming for them and the families, so like thinking of what grid size would be best to start with.
Yeah.
And now.
So the question was thinking about grid size, where do you start? Great question. There, I'm just pulling this up in case you don't have an iPad and you want to kind of look at the homepage. So there are a couple things to think about when I think about grid size and where to start. But obviously you want to think about fine motor and vision, right? So getting some OT perspective on that. So they need bigger buttons, then you can, that's definitely something, those are two things to consider. The other thing is, as far as access goes, you can turn off that grammar assistance so they don't, because I have kids that will press and hold, but it'll open it up and they didn't need to do that, and that gets frustrating. You could also, in Proloquo, one of the things that like is the bane of my existence with this app before I figured out which is that if you search for a word, it'll automatically add it to a million different pages. So then, like on the homepage, you can scroll forever, and there's all these vocabulary words that you didn't need to be there, but someone was just looking for it, and it added it. You can turn that off because scrolling sometimes is not great, especially if you have a kid with a key guard. Scrolling is impossible and frustrating, and not something you want to do. So those are things to consider as far as access. The other thing that I always weigh in the balance is navigation and operational competence. So if you have 12 buttons on the first screen, and those are the only 12 buttons you have, that's a lot of real estate for 12 words. And in order to get to more words, you have to press more and more buttons to get to a word. So is the kid going to navigate 5 steps to say dog or not? And so while having more buttons on the screen might be initially overwhelming, you can do things, a lot of systems have ways where you can mask words or hide specific words while they're learning. But the buttons will stay in the same place. So as you add them back in, they can, the buttons won't move around, but they don't have to navigate as far. Like I would be so frustrated if I had to navigate 12 steps to say help or like cat. I love my cat, right? So those are the two things I try to talk to parents about, is that bigger button, the smaller buttons can be helpful because that means they have less navigating to do, especially with littles. Like they need that instant, and with parents too, like they don't want to, if they're trying to model something for their kid and like prevent a meltdown potentially, they're not going to want to be going 20 layers deep to find that word. So those are a couple considerations to think about. So I always start, unless there's like a vision or motor concern, with more buttons and then reduce rather than less buttons and then make it bigger. Because I can mask vocabulary if I need to. That kind of thing. Does that make sense? Okay, so back time, what did you find?
In, out,
Mm-hmm.
all done.
All done. More bubbles, you can do more. Maybe anyone have like those cool toys that you put in the water and they go? My cat has those. Little fish. She does it in the tub. We do it in a different, not
Yeah.
big enough. So you could put, even some question words like where did it go? You put it in a bucket or something. There's a lot you can do just on this home page. And I think that as providers, if we model that for parents, I know little kids, sometimes they need that, those like concrete nouns too. Like that's how little kids learn language. So I'm not saying stick with core words, but I think core words are like these high frequency words that are on the stage. But I think showing parents like you can do a lot just right here without navigating a million different pages. That can just, it like does for me and with my students, especially if I'm a new software. I'm like, I can just hang out here the whole session and bring it, right? The thing about Proloquo, if you go into, let me think about where it might be. You go into like things. And then personal here. Not that there's like fun like stats in here, but you, there's always core vocabulary with the math lesson on every page. So if a kid benefits from that, like you always have core, like your sentence building words and then the nouns. This could be a great system for them. Questions about modeling? This is a great little demonstration of Proloquo, like more words, how you change features. Okay, wait time is essential for any therapy, but with AAC, it's extra important. I always say a minimum of 5 to 7 seconds for a typical, like generally for kids using AAC, which feels like a lifetime. And I tell my students that it's gonna, anyone watch America's Got Talent? I haven't watched it in a while, but you know when like Terry Crews says and the winner is, the person going home is, and, like the lights flash and there's like intense music and he's staring at the camera, you're like, just say it, Terry. Like that's what it feels like during wait time for kids to use for like because you want, but you're like, do it. So anyway, that's I always tell my students like that's the feeling you're gonna have and it's normal. So sometimes it's a helpful illustration for parents too, that 5 to 7 seconds is gonna last longer than you think. And this is a graphics I made a few years ago now. That kind of demonstrates, like simplifies why wait time is important. So for me, I'm a verbal communicator. I think of what I want to say. I coordinate my whole breath and articulators, and then I say it like that. For an person who uses AAC, they have to think of what they want to say. Then they have to think, okay, who's my communication partner? How will they understand? What will be the fastest, most successful way to communicate? Point? Can I use my eye gaze? Like just look at something? Can I use a gesture? Can I vocalize and this person would understand it? Or do I need to use AAC? If a proficient AAC communicator have to go through think through all of those things. Then they have to think about, okay, well now I know how I want to say it, and I have to coordinate my body potentially to access the system, or even moving their arm to point is more laborious, all of that. And then they say it. So I think if you do, I think this is still on the internet, it's probably somewhere buried in my Instagram if you want to borrow this, or I can email this graphic to you too. But this is something that's helpful for me to show the parents. So responding is like, these are all the things that USLPs know. It's the same language strategies. It's exactly the same. I always say AAC therapy is language therapy with a scary device involved. So you're going to recast, expand all of those language strategies you already know and use every day. The one thing you might do a little differently is you're going to add a model of the AAC when you're recasting. So if they say elephant and you're going to recast or expand, you might say big elephant and say it on the device to show those two words. And adding that model is important. Like that verbal response is really impactful, but adding the model is important for the input output, balancing that out, speaking the way your client is. The other thing that is really impactful for a lot of AAC communicators is attributing meaning and event casting, especially for children with complex communication needs. Like looking and understanding how they're currently communicating and acknowledging that is really important for them. So, for example, I see that you pushed the food away and you turned your head. I think you're saying, I don't want that, right? So you're describing the action that they did and the two things that they did. And then you're modeling and saying, I think this is what you're saying because, but you're not sure, you're leaving that door open. And that child might not know that those two actions might lead someone to think that they don't want it, right? Or they might be like, yes, you got me. You're my new favorite person in the world, right? So describing what they did that made you think that is really impactful. And then you're like also providing that model of like the pushing their food off the high chair. They could push something on their AAC device next time. Sometimes with families, especially with really complex physical, children's really involved physical needs, creating a communication dictionary is important for the families and other providers. Like this is when my child does this is typically what this means. And that can help other providers to do some of this, like the event casting, or to understand and reinforce those too. There's a mom, I don't remember her name. I met her at an assistive technology conference. She's from the St. Louis area. She has a child with Rett syndrome. And she had the most beautiful example of one of those dictionaries to like pass out to different providers. And it was like, this is exactly what would be helpful for her providers to know. This is Kate Ahern's least to most prompting hierarchy. Students who go through my clinics typically have this memorized. So this is kind of the prompting scale that I use in my clinics. This is available on the internet. I did not make this. Kate Ahern is actually a special education teacher who has really dove into the world of AAC and has her own like online preschool just for AAC users, which is really cool. I know I'm like, can I come work for you? That sounds really fun. But you always start with creating motivation. When we do an AAC eval, I tell my students like we're making a circus. It's got to be fun or they're not going to want to talk. So if you don't have fun activities planned, this is not going to go well. So one of the things we always ask in that pre-assessment interview, what does your child really love? And also what should we not have in the room, right? Like if a doll is going to trigger like a complete meltdown, we don't want to have that in the room. A couple of weeks ago, dressed up like Miss Rachel. Because I had like pregnancy overall, they're comfortable, right? And she loved Miss Rachel, and then she didn't let me able to come, and I was like heartbroken. But you know, trying to make it as fun as possible. And the first thing is like just pausing. So, Hannah, I'm going to borrow you. You're going to be my client. So you're doing an activity. What's something you really enjoy to do? Bubbles.
Yeah, that's great.
Who doesn't love us? Okay, so they have these activities that are pre-made, and they have a bubbles activity page in protocol. Super nice. We're gonna do bubbles, Hannah. And maybe you don't know. Maybe you don't do anything. So she doesn't do anything yet.
Okay.
Okay. So then I created motivation, inviting, or just like pause. He hasn't done anything yet. So if maybe when I said, we're gonna do bubbles, the device is over here and she's all like, I'm pulling the bubbles and she's like looking at me, right?
Yeah.
The next step is just to like, put this in front of her. And then we do bubbles, and she said bubbles. And then I recast and I say, more bubbles. And she's staring at me. And she's like, you have bubbles. And you know I want bubbles, right? And so it's, she's showing signs of frustration because she's like, I know that you know that I want bubbles because I'm looking at you. Do bubbles a few more and I'm just modeling bubbles, 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 bubbles. And then I wait again, right? Because I don't want to like, you have to use this to get bubbles because that's when the frustration happens. They're looking at you like, I know that it's, here's my analogy with this. If I say something to my husband and I think you should have understood me, but you did not hear me or did not understand me, and I have to repeat myself, I get frustrated. Anyone else? No? So I think like it's the same thing. Like the kid's like, you should have understood me. I'm getting frustrated. That's understandable. So if they're looking at me, I'm just gonna model bubbles, bubbles, bubbles. I'm going bubbles. We start back at the beginning. Pause, make sure it's in their vision. Maybe you don't do anything, it's got time. So I do a direct visual cue. So if she's still looking at me, and I think I can like push her a little more, I'm gonna like point to the bubbles and do more waiting. Bubbles, 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 bubbles. I do it a few times. It's not just like one to one. We're gonna play bubbles for a little bit. I'm gonna model like, oh, you got that one with your foot. Oh, that's funny. That one was in your hair. That's funny. Look at that one. It's pretty. And we're just talking. And so then we start kind of back at the beginning, and maybe we don't get to those lower ones because she's kind of responding. But if you needed to, I like the next step would be an indirect verbal cue. I think you're telling me you want. And then the direct verbal cue is like actually saying, I think you want bubbles, and doing the model with it. Modeling throughout is, for me, that's not a prompt in itself without like the verbal, I think you want bubbles. Because when I'm talking in front of a kid and they repeat me, I don't necessarily consider that, right? So it kind of, I always try to compare it back to what I'm doing with a speaking child and how I would count it for that. Does that make sense? And then if she's just like, we got all the way to that she's like, no. Then I'm like, okay, apparently bubbles aren't it today, right? Or not, today is not a bubble day. So that's when you circle back and you have to think about, this apparently isn't motivating, so what can I do differently from the very beginning to increase that motivation? Any questions about the prompting hierarchy?
I see that says no hand over hand. Do you ever do hand under hand or like kind of like leading into them, but not like?
So like, I try not to do any touching of the hand because I can't know what a kid wants to say for sure ever, right? Hand under hand can be helpful, or like kind of like they're like some kids like hover, and it's like, oh, yeah. But like Friday, I had a girl with very complex, like she had a hemiparesis, wasn't isolating a finger. We didn't have all the key guards that we needed for the different page sets that we were trying to trial. So I was trying to like just see, like, can you isolate a finger with a little bit of support? I'm not an OT, and unfortunately we didn't have an OT that day, but if I did, I'd be like, can you look at her hands, right? But like, tell me more about what's going on with her hands. But what I did do is she was just 3, was a referral from Wyandotte County Infant Toddler Services, and it took a while for her to get in. So she had like just transitioned to preschool. But if I put it in front of her and she'd look at it, and I'd say, you can touch it with your finger, or you can touch it with your hand. She would sometimes, because she was one of those kids like, I don't want to do this because you know what I want, right? So, but as I said, you can touch it with your finger. Sometimes she would lift up her finger, put her hand, and move it towards the device. So I'm like, never undervalue direct instruction of just saying, if you want to say something, you can use your hand instead of hand over hand. But definitely get an OT involved if there is some fine motor stuff going on as far as like isolation and access. Yeah.
One thing too, I know, like, when I've been introducing with parents to give them less pressure, the kiddo less pressure, it's like,
Yes.
it doesn't respond to whatever
Yes.
your kiddo says. Like, it doesn't matter if you're playing with bubbles and they hit car. And you can be like, I don't know, where is the car? I don't know. You
Exactly.
go find one. So I think too, just like, well, what if they don't touch bubbles? And what if they want to go to it, you know, they do this, it's like, fine, like, just
Right.
like you were talking to them and they were saying random words.
I
and we
love
respond
that.
the Same way.
Exactly, exactly. I think there's pressure for accuracy when AAC is involved, but it's like, kids don't say words right, or they say the wrong word, or put the words together wrong, and we're just like, that's great, you said something, right? But it's because you can have control over it, that you feel like, oh, this is something I can do to support. And I also, another thing I talked to with parents is that I worked with several older kids or young adults that are so prompt dependent and will not touch an AAC device unless someone else is touching their arm or their hand. And so I'm like, I just don't want to even start down that slippery slope. Let me see where we're at. So we have another activity. Oh, great. We're right there. Questions so far?
I have a clarification.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't, it's not that you wouldn't say touch bubbles, like if they were, you were going through that whole hierarchy and you were presenting the bubbles and they were looking at you and they're reaching for the bubbles and they were showing you with their gesture that they do in fact still want the bubbles, would you ever tell them then touch bubbles or would you just continue modeling at that?
I would just continue modeling, but then I might say, I think you want bubbles. I think you want to say bubbles. Or I think you want bubbles. I wouldn't say touch bubbles, because that's another dangerous thing of like the prompt dependency. Where they'll like hover. I also work with kids who will hover and be like, touch it. So they like just knowing that they have autonomy to say whatever they want to say and kind of presenting it more like, I think this is what you want, and kind of showing them where it is. Yeah.
Do you ever tell them like you can touch it if you want to?
Yeah,
as a
you can
prompt?
touch it, like
Yeah.
you can use your hand to touch the screen to tell me whatever you want. That kind of thing. 'Cause it's less of a like command to follow through for accuracy. Is that helpful? Any other questions? I don't think we're gonna get through my last part, which is like assessment skills, but that's okay. I was some back some time. Really want to get into that. But honestly, all you need to know if you're like doing trials with a family is everything we just talked about. You just need to like take data. So I can briefly show you like a data sheet example. Because if you're doing these trials and sessions, you're just playing, you're using that prompting hierarchy and you're taking data over what level of the hierarchy they're on. Are they saying things independently? What words are they saying independently? How many words? Are they navigating through the system to find words? That's honestly what I'm doing. So you can do it in an eval, or you can just do it when you're with the family. So family involvement. I try to get the family as involved as possible from the beginning. I have the luxury of having students with me. So as we're going through different systems, I have multiples of different systems. So like, this is the one your kid is looking at now. Here are some specific features of that. What do you think about this? And sometimes, like anyone familiar with Langford's for Life, people either love it or they hate it at first. Sometimes later, but parents are always like, this makes no sense to me. I'm like, I promise if there's an organization, and first, I promise the reason I'm showing it is that some kids we can see that this is what clicks in their little tiny brains. And I've actually had a parent be like, I hate this one, it doesn't make sense to me, but I can see that my kid is doing the best on it, so that's the one we're getting. But they involving them with the process and helping them understand what I'm looking for to see like what's clicking is helpful in that instance. Because otherwise, the parent would have been like, what did you do? What did you give my child? This makes no sense to me. Yeah, and so they're like in our evaluations, they're sitting in the room, they're watching everything. And device abandonment is a huge problem in the world of AAC. So that's why I try to make sure families are not only involved in the decision at the end, but feel like they have an informed decision. I do that education. Okay. I think I forgot. I meant to grab some cards. It's okay. everyone, if you have like a little piece of scratch paper, you can just brainstorm in your head. This is something I used to do when I was practicing. Oh, Anna saved the day. So this is something I used to do with families when I was practicing full time. I called them recipe cards for AAC. The thing I loved about the cards is that I would develop them with an activity that they would frequently do at home. And then I would say, okay, so you let your kid likes to play Legos at home or blocks or whatever the activity was. We're gonna make this recipe card together. And then when you go home, you're going to take this recipe card and tape it to the lid of your blocks. So whenever you pull out blocks, you have all of these ideas of words you could model right there with your activity. And you're coming up with this list together with the family. So at the top, I just wrote activities, and then I got a column for common words, 2-word phrases, and then any notes that we talked about that they wanted to like have there as like a memory trigger. So do we want to like do little groups maybe, or yeah, so maybe like 2 tables together, and you all can pick an activity that you want to do. Pretend like you're walking through it with a family. With the 1 words, the common words, I always try to push the families to think beyond the obvious nouns and beyond the colors, because I was like, those will be the ones that will be easy for you to think of. But in order to get to those 2-word combos, we need verbs, we need like articles. So let's think about what other words we might use. Does that make sense? So make your list of common words first for your activity.
Yeah, what is it? When you say they didn't take it, that yeah, painting. You need a snack and water. I know. I thought. Slow. Yeah, right. Oh, lovely. I was like, I was thinking that's what we're getting. Oh, no, I thought that. Would take out the journey. Oh, yeah. Great. I was like. Yes. Yeah. That's what I was.
Okay. Once you got a good list, once you have a good list of those single words, think about 2-word phrases that you like. If your kid, the kid is getting the single word phrase things, what are 2-word combinations you could start using?
2-word phrases.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
It's yeah.
pretty. Yeah. Hair. Help. Wash meat. Out. Wash face. Sit still. That's a single word. Yeah.
Scrub it up. It's just actually full two words that you.
Yeah.
I love you guys have such a time and want to make sure you guys have the opportunity to share, give them feedback. Would any group like to share their activity and their word combos?
It's a great idea just in general for.
It's
Target words, they're like, hands.
So it's a big idea in general.
Thanks. Yeah. So like, but and then it's like make it a, like for some parents, they might have like they can tape it to the box, but some parents might also just like to have this on a key ring hanging somewhere.
Yeah.
So whatever works for that family, but it makes it really accessible because you have like, this is in this activity, what you do. So, and like on the back, they could make notes, like if they want, if the family's the type of family that takes lots of notes to like talk with you about. They'd be like, oh, on this day, I did this and this happened, like, isn't that cool and fun? Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Good activity,
Yeah.
something you can use.
Yeah.
And I think too, like for students, and like this, it's really helpful to preview, especially for AAC, like you make this list and then you can go through together, where are these words on the device? And then for students, I always say, you need to make the list of words for the activity because that will give you, when you go to the lab and you're preparing for your session, here are the list of words that I need to know for this activity. So I can feel prepared and not get sweaty pits because I make this. So like, it just helpful too for parents if they're thinking like, okay, AAC is so scary. I have this list of words. I'm going to pick 3 today that we're going to do during this activity. Here's my list. Let me quickly refresh, where are these 3 words? And then they can just do that activity. It makes it less like, less of a thought process to think about how you do it. I got a lot of great feedback from families. I think it's a great way because you can make that list together. And as they grow more confident in doing it, you can do a new activity and like give them more, like let them look at the device, let them think about what works. Maybe they'll start doing it on their own, right? That's the goal. So I'm going to skip ahead a few slides. Any other feedback for that activity?
So we were saying on the say so.
Thanks. Okay, so we're just going to talk about data collection. What data to collect in AAC sessions, or if you like do it, sort of introduce it, what data, even if you're making a referral to an evaluation clinic, if you have that data written in some notes or something that you can share with the evaluating SLP, it'd be really impactful. So, utterances. What does the child do independently? And then I put in parentheses, after model counts as independent, right? Because if I said elephant at the zoo with my godson and he said elephant, I wouldn't be like, oh, you just said that because I said it. We just like, we learned a new word. That's great, right? What the client does with the different levels of prompting. So thinking about that prompting hierarchy, was it like I just moved it in front of them, moved the device in front of them, and they're like, oh yeah, I can do that. Or was I pointing more, that kind of thing. So and then increase instances of effective communication or communication with some support. So you're seeing that increased autonomy with their utterances. You're going to be thinking about those AAC competencies on that slide, operational competence, Are they navigating through multiple pages to find a word independently? For some systems like LAMP, in the beginning, I might have to navigate to the page with the noun for the kid to say that word. But then I start like backing up one step. So will they navigate 2 steps to get it? Then from the beginning, will they navigate the 3 steps? So that's a way to show progress. Because initially, if there's navigation involved, I'm like, I'm supporting you with that. So that's a whole other area of competency. Then you have like the social competence of like carrying the device around the room to someone else. Or like taking the device to mom and saying, go, let me leave this crazy lady, whatever it is. All of those things, like if a kid picks up a device and puts it in their lap, I'm like, yeah, that's something to make note of, right? Maybe that's the only system that they've done that with so far. Maybe this one's clicking more. We don't know. It's something to document though. So this is an example of the data collection sheet that I provide for my students and say, you can use this if you want for the evaluations. So we have this column, the system that we're using, number of independent utterances. So that's just tallies. And then examples of the independent utterances. Because some, especially Medicaid, it's Medicaid. Well, they only said bubbles. That's not it. That's why I got into the sassy mess with the auditor, because she was like, well, you didn't provide examples of everything the kid said in the session. And I was like, excuse me, since when is that the standard of documentation? Let's see. She was also an SLP, so I was like, this is even worse. That you're telling me this. And then number of utterances after partial physical prompts. So again, just tallies, and then some examples, and then after a verbal model. So I kind of bunched some of those prompting levels together. So there's just like 3 big ones: independent, after physical model, like either moving it in front of or pointing to the picture, or I'm saying, I think you want to say bubbles. Those are the 3. And then additional information, if I'm seeing them navigate, if I see them adjust the volume, if I see them turn it off, that kind of thing. Makes sense? Or like sometimes you're problem solving the same system, different grid sizes. You're putting key guards, like all of that is different data sets. Questions? Yeah.
Do you think, and maybe we have other devices, do you think we're doing our families a disservice by only having iPads?
Not necessarily, right? So iPads are great. And if you think that they need a dedicated device, there's lots of iOS platforms. It used to be that insurance companies weren't super picky, and I could say iOS platform, and that was good enough for a trial, but they're starting to get picky. So I literally did a trial, iOS platform with Landworks for Life. I didn't have the specific hardware, the ProSlate with me the day of that eval. And ProSlate kind of, or Forbes kind of said, everyone else is going to go through, like, can we just try it? Like, I have to bring the kid all the way back in to trial the same device, the same software with different hardware. And they turned around and they denied it. So I had to bring the kid back in. By that point, I had the hardware. So I think you can start trials, but then like if you want to try the ProSlate, because they're like, they need a key guard or like whatever the AbleNet devices or any of the other ones with a similar system, you can get those. Does that make sense?
Just like it's kind of, we're kind of working on our process for how we're getting devices funded and like gonna update that with a cheat sheet. So we're trying to get in contact with like AbleNet and stuff like that, so we can hopefully get more devices funded through insurance. I think we've gotten them like more of the mid-tech, like the big, getting stuff like that with iPods, still only high-tech one. So we're trying to get stuff figured out so we can get more devices funded through insurance. And
like,
those
yeah.
variety or Blue Cross.
Forbes AAC with the iOS platform that has all the different apps except CD Snap. If you have devices that have multiple apps on them and you apply, they will send you just the case. So that way you can put your iPad in their case. That makes it the hardware. So that is a great workaround too. And especially if you do a lot of evaluations and you're getting some funding, like they'll give it to you for a trial period. But if you're using it and you're like putting funding packets through, they generally will let you. So that's Natasha. I'll go back to her. That slide, she's super great, super nice. She would come out, and like any of these people probably would, Andrew's going on maternity leave soon. But if you ever wanted any of them to come out and talk through their specific products, that's part of their job. So,
Okay.
definitely just reach out to them and they'll come and do an update with your organization about their new products, different things. They'll bring their products, you can try them. That is how I really learned about AAC when I was working full time or keeping up, is just being, because they have me on their list. Like, Susan, can I come by and be like, yes, I want you to, but like, I don't know. Right? So it's that kind of balance. Or if you go to the conference, the CASHA conference in June, they'll all be there. But yeah, Natasha is the Forbes rep, and so we were going to ask her about that evaluation program. We can get your kits. That would be the person, and you can get them for iPad minis and standard iPads. Thank you for that's my very quick presentation. I do have business cards here. If anyone wants them, if you have any questions, you can also pop up your after. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We wanted to tell everyone the Pediatric Alliance, the Consumer Pediatric Alliance, they have an event Saturday that's on AAC. I believe it's 4 hours of AACCU. I tried to register for it, but it said it would accept it. So I assumed that meant it was full. She thinks that it's because I was not a member, so you may have to become a member of the Pediatric Alliance.
I was able to sign up without being a member.
When? I
A
tried to
couple
do it.
weeks ago.
Well, I tried to do it 2 days ago.
Okay, so maybe.
So I'm not really sure, so if anyone wants that, I can send that to you, so I bet it's full. Okay, I was wondering if it's full, if I put myself doing it.
Thank you so much.
It's your chairs away.
If you guys could put your chairs down, so we don't all have to do it.
Yes, yes.
Tables stack up back there? They stack up right where she is, yeah.
Sorry.
I'm in the office without.
Unfortunately,
I was thinking.
You did. Do you know how, if I stop this, go like, still? Yeah, it's recording.
Yeah.
Leave or?
I honestly don't want to, like, you got
Hannah? I'm just afraid to hit leave.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, I'm so sorry. Do I just hit leave and it'll save?
So.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
You're